and thank you for coming to this Zoom meeting. Tonight, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Thay for his enormous support to the AV community for the past years. They selflessly and unconditionally offer his teaching to us on a regular basis, especially when he knew that our Bhante Teja was not very well. And this teaching is always full of love and compassion, and we often feel very inspired and our hearts are filled with love, after listening to today's talk. So on behalf of the Engaged Buddhist Association community, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for supporting us, all this while. And today will be the last talk of the year 2022. So after today's talk, then we will kind of close until the next year. So today's talk today is specifically for this purpose, rest. So over to you, Thay.
Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Thank you for welcoming me, and it's actually been a great pleasure to spend a night a month with the AEB and to have our lovely day in Sydney when we had our Dharma day at the Buddhist Library. A great highlight of my year was that day, to meet everybody and to have such lovely conversation with everyone. And so also the other thing that I'm grateful to AEB for inviting me to give these talks is that whenever you teach something, you understand it more deeply. It's you think that you understand a whole lot of things and you've learnt the Dhamma. Like I've been practicing since 1978, so that's like nearly half my life. Yes, it is half my life, more than that. So you think that you understand the Dhamma, but when you have to actually teach something, you learn it more deeply, and you realize how you have taken on the Dhamma for yourself. How it's not just a theory, but it's also a practice, and it's a practice that it's a practice that's deepened with deepening understanding, and especially if you teach it, you learn more, and you learn a lot from what other people think. I mean, I've learned a great deal from what everybody has shared. I don't ever assume that I'm the only one with a reasonable understanding or a reasonable perspective on the Dharma. I'm fully aware that many people have been practicing for many, many years. And even if they haven't been, even if they've only been practicing for a short time, they still bring beginner's mind with them. They still bring new insight and a new enthusiasm to their practice. And for me as a monk and a teacher of the Dhamma, that's really precious, because I get to understand other people's experience more, and I'm instructed by what they say. So I'm really very grateful to AEB for giving me this ongoing opportunity to teach, or to not teach, but to share my insights into the Dhamma. And I'm perfectly happy to keep doing that into the future. And you've asked me to come back, so there we are. Everybody's happy. Okay, let's invite the bell, and we'll sit for perhaps, what's the time now? We'll sit for 10 minutes. And tonight, again, like last time, there's no need to work hard in order to become enlightened in this next 10 minutes. It's just an opportunity to take some rest, which is what we will be looking at tonight, taking rest and caring for ourselves and showing lots of loving kindness for ourselves by taking a rest, simply by being attentive to our breathing. So if you sit in a position that's comfortable for yourself, whether you're on a chair or on the floor, on a cushion, just be very comfortable. Maybe take 3 deep breaths. Sit with your back nice and straight, but not rigid, just nice and straight and relaxed. Relaxed shoulders, your hands in your lap, your chin tucked in, and your nose in line with your abdomen. And imagine that beautiful smile on the statue of a Buddha. See if you can allow that same gentle, beautiful smile to arise on your own lips, and notice the muscles in your face relax. We just come to rest in this moment. And to rest with hearts that are grateful for all the blessings in our lives. For the work that we do, for the people who love us and whom we love. The many things that have fulfilled our lives. And the many lessons we have learned from the challenges in our lives. So much to be grateful for. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, calm. And breathing out, rest. Calm and rest. So relax in your chair or on the floor, on the cushion. If you need to massage yourself, although it's only been 10 minutes, you may still need to massage yourself. Please do so. So the portion of Jesus' teaching that I'm going to share with you tonight comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. And this is what it says. This is what Jesus says. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This is the last of 5 portions of Matthew's Gospel, which, when I was 16 years of age, which is now 54 years ago, inspired me to live the life of a renunciate, a monk. 54 years later, I am still trying to live that life. I am still working with that aspiration and what its consequences are for me now. I began this journey of renunciation from within the framework of the Christian faith. The stories shared here in these last 5 Dhamma talks are told from within a Christian framework. I'm not going to try and translate the language from Christian language to Buddhist language, although I have come to express my 54 years of experience from a Buddhist perspective. I tell the story now as a Buddhist monk who loves Jesus. And I ask the question, so what's not to love about a person so good? This view of being a Buddhist monk who loves Jesus is something that increasingly more Buddhists and Christians understand, which is really lovely. But I don't expect others, Buddhist or Christian or anything else, to understand. It is enough that I understand what I'm saying. It is more than understanding, however. It is my life, the life I live, the seamless garment in which I clothe myself daily. It is also always a joy when others, Buddhist, Christian, or whatever, understand me, but they don't have to. Having said that, one of the great yearnings of my life is to be understood. It is a yearning that, as far as this life goes, I can trace back to infancy, when, arriving only a couple of months after my parents' marriage, I felt it necessary to justify my existence. I caused my parents to get married was the thought that I carried around for many years. And this is a core wound, but it's a wound that is in the process of being healed fully. At the same time, my sense is that my great-grandmother, who was half Cornish and half Welsh, loved me unconditionally. Likewise, I also knew that my father's mother, a devoutly Christian woman of hardy English peasant stock, loved me also, without question. And that gave me a sense of myself as both a Celt and an English peasant, as well as being one whose first avowed intent was to be a pilgrim. Both those senses of identity, the identity of being a Celtic English peasant and one who was intent on being a pilgrim, have given my life a real strength. So, of course, the call to renunciation, to true pilgrimage, means that we are called, as the Buddha said, to swim against the tide of worldliness. Renunciation, or swimming against this tide, has been my path in the face of every orthodoxy, in the face of every option that sets out to form me, in the face of everything that others have told me I should do. This also provides the conditions required for the need to be understood to arise in me. One example of this occurred many years ago when I visited St Andrew's Parish Church in the Northamptonshire village of Yardley Hastings in Britain. It was from this little village that my great-great-grandparents, Eli and Drusilla King, left in 1851 to come, passage paid by the Marquess of Northampton, to Adelaide. They were the grandparents of my father's mother, whom I mentioned before. They were hard-working, good people. My aunt once told me that I looked like a king. I looked like a member of that family, and I very proudly claimed that, because I could see it too. When I visited Yardley Hastings in 1992, 141 years after my family left, I had no idea where they lived. There was an old water pump in the town. Maybe my female relatives had pumped water from that pump. There was, however, the door to the parish church, centuries older than 141 years. In fact, it was built in Saxon times. All I could do was to go up to the door of the church and place my hand on it, to place my hand on the same door that my relatives had placed their hands on over many centuries. I was very moved, and I sat in the church with my thoughts and my feelings. A lady previously unknown to me called Jessie Lack came and sat with me. She asked me what I was doing there and how I was feeling, because obviously I was very moved by the experience of making that connection with my ancestors. I told her, and she said, "So you've come home." The relief was immense, not only because I was welcomed home, but chiefly because I was understood. And so we come to that beautiful saying of Jesus that offers us the same comfort, the same understanding, measureless in quantity and perfect in quality. Come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And an interesting aside is that when this lady, Jessie Lack, and I were sitting in the church talking, 1,000 miles from Australia, she said, "Oh, I have a friend who comes from South Australia." And I said, "Ah." She said, "Yes, he's an Anglican priest." And I said, "What's his name?" And she said, "His name is Father Graham Cooling." And I said, "He was my parish priest." So that's a typical Adelaide story. Adelaide is so small that eventually you'll meet everybody. And I had gone all the way home to Northamptonshire only to meet someone who knew someone from all the way home in Adelaide. So it was a very lovely and touching experience of meeting that very kind woman, and I've never forgotten it. The verse, "Come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest," became deeply meaningful for me, based again on lived experience. In 1990, when I was still a practicing Christian training for the Anglican priesthood, I was riding my bicycle from the Adelaide railway station to St Chad's Church in Fullerton. My spiritual director at the time was a priest called Father Donald Gray Smith, and he was the parish priest of St Chad's in Fullerton. I wanted to get to the morning mass before our monthly appointment. By the time I arrived there, my mind was very agitated. I was in no fit state for anything much at all. I went into the parish hall where they were holding services at that time because somebody had burnt the church down, and I sat up the back. For some reason, I decided not to follow the liturgy, but simply to sit quietly, practicing breathing meditation and using this verse as a mantra. Breathing in, come unto me. Breathing out, all you who labour. Breathing in, and are heavy laden. Breathing out, I will give you rest. At the time to go up and receive Jesus' body and blood in the form of Holy Communion, I was ready. In complete silence, I walked forward, I knelt down, I held out my hands, and in that wordless silence, when there is nothing left to be said, I received Jesus wholeheartedly into myself. I had again engaged with what we call in Zen Buddhism, my koan, and I found myself healed of the tiredness that I felt. I had renounced thought. I had renounced words. I had renounced action. I was obedient to the voice of the heart, and Jesus came to me. In our mutual approach to one another, we met. He in the renunciation that resurrection is founded on, me in the renunciation that discipleship is founded on. And I claimed at the time that I am his and he is mine forever and forever. The final verse of this portion of Matthew's Gospel, verses 29 and 30, have fascinated me for many years from a linguistic point of view. My own understanding of the language has enabled me to understand more deeply the implications of who Jesus is as a bodhisattva. That is to say, I am able to claim a relationship with Jesus in Buddhist terms. And it also helped me understand more what the relationship between him and his disciple might be. What is interesting to me is that this is basically parallel to the disciple's relation to the Buddha as well. The disciple, the renunciation and the discipleship that comes from this is true both for Jesus, for my relationship with Jesus and the Buddha. So the verse says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, as we all know, the English word yoke refers to the big piece of wood that joins two oxen or cattle together so that together they can be much more strong than if they are trying to pull a load by themselves. And the Greek word, the English word is yoke, but it has a Greek cognate, a Greek word, which means exactly the same and it's zugos. Now, the New Testament was originally written in Greek, and its translation into English translated the word zugos as yoke. And they're in fact the same word in two different European languages. The root of the Greek word is zug, which is cognate with yoke. The final consonant of the Greek is g or gamma. G is the voiced version of the unvoiced consonant k. So if you say k, you make the same shape with your mouth as when you say the sound g. If you try it now, see what happens. K, g. You find that your mouth makes exactly the same shape with each letter, each sound. But k, we call that unvoiced because it doesn't have a resonance. But g is a voiced consonant because it has a resonance deeper in the chest. So they're really the same sound, just one is voiced and the other is unvoiced. So if you replace the unvoiced k with the voiced g, yoke becomes yoga. In this verse, Jesus is calling his students to practice his yoga. He is the guru, the master, the Rabboni, and we are the disciples who learn from him. In complete trust, we renounce our own will in order to become yoked with him. The oxen yoked in their joint effort to pull the cart. We don't put the cart before the oxen. The yoked oxen provide the power to draw the cart. When we are yoked with our teacher, when we renounce our faulty view of reality and become one with our teacher, we begin to wake up, to become freer. We are able to really rest from the struggles that ignorance places upon us. So likewise, if we yoke ourselves to the Buddha by appropriating his teaching and practicing it, the same thing happens. We begin to wake up. We begin to become freer. We are able to really rest from the struggles that ignorance places upon us. Let me take the linguistic aspect of this a little bit further. Yoke and yoga are related to the Sanskrit word eka, which means one. And if you look at most Indian languages or languages from the subcontinent, the word for one is eka. And that k, or unvoiced consonant, if it becomes a voiced consonant, is the same as the Greco-Roman word ego, the focus, where all the separate voices that make up our personality become one. It again is like the oxen with the yoke. That this idea of ego or self is really the coming together of the disparate voices that make up our personality. A lot of people talk about having just, that the Dhamma teaches us to smash the ego. Well, I don't think that that's a correct understanding of the word ego. Ego is not wrong. Ego is not bad. It's a technical term that Freud borrowed from both Greek and Latin. And it describes that aspect of self that holds all the different voices in us together as one. And that doesn't mean to say that it's bad. It just means to say that we have to keep it in proportion to everything else. So to take on the awakened teacher's yoke, to practice their yoga, is to let go of the I, me, mine thought and to entrust ourselves into the practice of wisdom and love, truth and understanding. The Buddha's invitation seems to me to be the same. The Buddha says, Ehipassiko bhikkhave. Ehipassiko means come and investigate my yoga for the benefit of all beings. And when the Buddha says Ehipassiko bhikkhave, he's talking to the bhikkhus. Bhikkhave is all the bhikkhus. But Ehipassiko, the Buddha is saying Ehipassiko to everybody who practices his Dhamma, who becomes one with him, who takes on his yoke, who practices his yoga. And that's not just the bhikkhus, it's not just the bhikkhunis, it's everybody, the whole fourfold Sangha, laymen, laywomen, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Come and investigate my yoga for the benefit of all beings. So is there anything objectively to be afraid of in letting go and surrendering to the yoga that makes us one with the truth discovered by both Jesus and the Buddha? I don't think I think not, actually. I don't think so, because it seems to me that both the Buddha and Jesus are gentle and lowly in heart. They both offer an ultimate rest, which the Buddha refers to as nirvana or nibbana, is the ultimate rest of the heart and mind when we put aside completely the thought of I, me, and mine, as opposed to you and yours. So why then does renunciation or letting go feel like a painful struggle sometimes? It's because our conditioned sense of self, our sense of a permanent, solid I, me, mine that seeks to defend and aggrandize itself will fight to survive. It has a strong survival instinct. This letting go of what the mystics, including the Catholic monk Thomas Merton, who engaged in serious dialogue with Buddhism, called the false self, is never easy. It is never easy to let go of the false self of ataniya. This fundamental renunciation is a challenge. Renouncing ataniya, the I, me, mine thought, selfishness, whatever you want to call it, is a real challenge to us all. The Christian desert mother, Ama Sincletica, put the journey of seeking for spiritual union with the truth in this way. She said, "In the beginning, there are a great many battles and a good deal of suffering for those who are advancing towards spiritual union. Afterwards, there is ineffable joy. It is like those who wish to light a fire. At first, they are choked by the smoke and cry, and by this means obtain what they seek. So we must also kindle the divine fire in ourselves through tears and hard work." Lots of people, including myself, we get into Buddhism at first, and it feels like just one constant struggle after another. And that might even remain true for most of our lives. It does seem like tears and hard work is what characterizes the spiritual journey, this movement towards renunciation. But we simply have to keep on keeping on. For me, the context of renunciation, which I have been at pains to share with you over the last 5 Dhamma sharings, is the monastic life. Not everybody's called to be a monk, not everybody's meant to be a monk or a nun, but some of us are. There are, in the monastic life, a myriad of little letting goes that life demands. And it's not just celibacy, it's not just not owning things. There are many things that the monk's life or the nun's life require of us that's actually hard work. But others, their journey to renunciation is not necessarily the monastic life. An example that we've spoken of before, both with Meredith and with our friend from Canberra, whose name I've forgotten. How can I have forgotten his name?
Jeff?
Jeff, that's right. Thank you, Jeff. For others like Jeff and everybody who's spoken about it, the renunciation is about parenthood and the renunciation that demands, giving up that idea of I, me, and mine. I often think that my mother and father practiced renunciation really well in bringing me up. I never lived up to my parents' hopes and expectations. The last thing they ever wanted was for me to become a monk, for example. And then in the early 1970s, when I became a hippie, they were even more horrified. They had to let go of what they wanted for me. However, I know perfectly well that my parents always loved me. They never turned their backs on me, even though my aspirations and my behavior could be really inconvenient for them. They let go. They renounced, ultimately, what they wanted of me, what they expected of me, and they continued to love me all the same. And for that, I'm enormously grateful. That has also given me great strength in life to have known the love, the unconditional love of my parents. Although I must admit, I'm sure there were times that they would have wished I was different from the person I was. However, they continued to love me all the same. In our letting go of I, me, mine, we will discover that regularly we don't succeed. In every attempt to be renunciates, we don't necessarily succeed. Another monk, a Christian in fact, once said to me that a monk is a person who falls down and gets up, and falls down and gets up, and so on and so on. But I think that that's not just true of the monk. I think that's true of all practitioners. Everybody trying to live the spiritual life falls down and gets up and falls down. Every parent falls down and gets up, falls down and gets up. And given that that's the case, we are going to need to be patient and understanding with ourselves. We are going to have to let go of expectations we have of ourselves. We are going to have to renounce any idea that we must be perfect. We are just who we are, doing our best, falling down and getting up. So I'd like to say at the end of this talk, thank you again for giving me over the last 5 months the opportunity to share with you the most profound personal spiritual reflections of my life. What I've discovered over the last 10 years of reflecting on these texts from Matthew's Gospel, it has been the most profound personal spiritual reflections in the whole of my life. My goal is to continue to reflect on these, my understandings of what I think of as the most profound insight of the Buddhist tradition, and that is the insight into emptiness, voidness, sunyata in Pali, or shunyata in Sanskrit. I don't want only to continue to reflect on these teachings, but to work out the many ways of practicing them. My intention is also to understand my teacher's insight from his book, The Original Source of the Buddha Dhamma, which I'm translating into English from the French translation of my teacher's talks given originally in Vietnamese. And further, I want to continue to understand and practice the great gift given to me late last year, which I've shared with you, and that is of the moment-by-moment bodhisattva. So continuing to work on these insights that I've shared with you over the last 5 months, continuing to work on my teacher's teachings, and continuing to practice being the moment-by-moment bodhisattva, I think that's enough to keep me busy for the rest of my life. So while there will be time for conversation, I want to offer a blessing, because this is the last time this year we will meet. May you all be well and happy. May you continue to grow in your understanding and your practice of the Buddha's truth and the love that that implies. And may you continue developing the skillful means necessary to enable others to become whole and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So if there are any anything you want to ask questions about or share your own thoughts with? Let's have a little time now. And there may be things that I've said that haven't been easy to understand. I hope that they were easier to understand, but I'm perfectly willing to explain things that I've said that may be hard to understand. Who could that be? Who could that be? That man who wants to talk now. Do I know his name?
Thay, thank you very much. You made me happy with tonight's talk. The reason is that you're a very good man. I appreciate that you could talk about your non-existent self, life, past, family, etc., because they are part of us. It's really an accident that for the past 15 months, every Thursday evening, 6 o'clock till 7:30, there was a Bible study in Hungarian. And it's incredible that from the Bible study, listening to you and many other lovely teachers. I'm very, very happy that I'm not alone, that I have two teachers, Jesus Christ and the Buddha. And it's really funny when I hear things in the Bible study, especially the Old Testament, that completely useless. And like tonight, I wanted to say something, but I wasn't brave enough because they know that I'm a Buddhist for more than 50 years. And it's about the Holy Spirit. They say that the Holy Spirit comes from God. Many, many Jewish people received the Holy Spirit. And I'm 100% sure that the Holy Spirit born with us. We are born with the Holy Spirit inside us. Reason I got this thought because the Buddha said, I don't know if who said it exactly, that we are all Buddhas. Meredith is a Buddha, Thay is a Buddha, hopefully Frankie is a Buddha, but we have to work for it. Not just wait for God to send the Holy Spirit to us. But I'm not brave enough to say this because they all know that I'm a Buddhist, and some apprehend didn't like when I was saying what the Buddha taught, what was the same with Jesus Christ. But you really made me happy that I feel that I'm on the right way, having two teachers, not only the Buddha, but, well, three teachers. The third teacher is my wife. She taught me so many things in 60 years, and all the other people. And the spiritual person falls down, gets up, falls down, gets up. So right, so precise. And I know that we're not supposed to be perfect. And the Bible, often we talk about useless things and not about the teaching of Jesus. It's hopeless. Whatever happened to the Jewish people, like today, there was a couple. The apostles were accepting people's money. They sold their houses, they sold their land, and gave all the money to the apostles. These were the original Christians. But this couple, when they sold their house and land, they kept nearly half of the money. And when Peter, the chief apostle, realized this, he told them, you should be ashamed of yourself. You lied to God. And they collapsed and died. And all these tales, then I become a Buddhist. when I hear all these things. I cannot take it serious because Jesus is love. So, but it's a fantastic thing. If you have a minute, I bring you the book, Two Masters, One Message. Goes in a very entertaining way, one by one, step by step, what was common in the two masters. If you, maybe somebody else will want to say something now, and then in that time, I bring the book.
Well, before you go, Frank,
Yep.
there is something that I'd like to say, and that is that when Christians talk about the Holy Spirit,
Yes.
I think they're talking about something that Buddhists have an experience of too. But Buddhists call that, and I think it's also part of the Theravadan tradition, because I knew a Theravadan monk who had this name, but that we talk about bodhicitta.
Yes. Yes.
Bodhicitta is the awakened mind, and we can experience that spontaneously. Something happens in our life, and we suddenly wake up.
Yes.
We haven't necessarily heard the teaching of the Buddha. We haven't necessarily come across a Buddhist teacher. We haven't necessarily come across a Sangha, but something happens to wake us up to all kinds of things. For me, what woke me up was my own suffering at the end of a relationship that was very important to me. And suddenly I was presented with this teaching that everything is impermanent. And I didn't want to know that at all. Deep in my heart, I knew it was true. And I think that that's the awakening of bodhicitta. And every time I want to draw a picture of bodhicitta, it's always a bird ascending into heaven.
Oh.
That's exactly what Christians draw when they're drawing the Holy Spirit. So I wonder whether it's worth your while, whenever they talk about the Holy Spirit, to think of bodhicitta. In what way? What am I learning about bodhicitta from what these Christians understand? And what can I teach them about the Holy Spirit from what my own understanding of bodhicitta?
I see.
I mean, my view, I could be completely wrong. You know, the Dalai Lama could sort of sack me tomorrow if only I was a Tibetan Buddhist. But I think that it's really worth our while seeking out the things that we as human beings have in common. Because if the truth is, we are one species. We are all having the same experiences. And we're all trying to figure it out in our own human way. It's really important to remember that we're not so far apart ever.
True. Maybe different names we use.
Yes, maybe different names. I remember when I went to teach in Zimbabwe, I knew an American woman who was an anthropologist. And she made a really racist remark to me one day. She said, "Oh, Africans, life comes very cheaply to Africans." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. How did she get to that point of view? Why is their valuing of life any different from my valuing of life? And I remember one day, one of my students, a young woman student, a young African woman student, someone came to the school to tell her grandmother had died. And she burst into tears, and she leant against the wall of the school and cried and cried and cried and cried. And my grandmothers, when they died, I was just as heartbroken. And I thought, life doesn't come cheaply to anybody. No human being, whether they're Africans, Asians, Europeans, or what they are. Life is precious to all of us. Of course it is, because we're the same species. So, you know, I mean, it's worth our while kind of engaging with one another to try and see whether we're actually talking about the same things, but just using, as you just said, different words.
Yes.
different words.
The same thing with nirvana.
Yeah.
Uh,
The same thing with love.
yes, same thing it is. And all tears are salty.
Say that all again.
All tears are salty.
All
When
tears.
you cry.
Yes, sorry, I understand. Yeah.
So I appreciate everything you said. Hey, thank you very much.
And there are things that I have learned from Vietnamese Buddhists who are not from the same culture as me. There are things I've learned from them that I could never have learned from my own culture.
Yes.
I couldn't have learnt those things from my culture. I could not have. I've always valued my ancestors, but in Vietnamese Buddhism and in Chinese Buddhism and in Korean Buddhism and in Japanese Buddhism, ancestors are something really important. And so that taught me that I was on the right track by loving my ancestors. Thank you for showing me just how important my ancestors are, how I could not have my life without 2 million years of human evolution. And I discovered once that I had a lovely thought that came out of this teaching of, how when everybody, if we assume that the anthropologists are right and all the human beings left Africa, when we got to the north of Africa, some went right and some went left. And they would have said to each other 70,000 years ago, I'll see you in a little while. And of course we did. I as a British European human being, and them as a Vietnamese European, we all met back up together, cousins. We're all cousins. Same with my dogs. They and I are cousins. They're a bit more separate. So why am I saying all of this? Partially because I never have the opportunity to talk about these things with many people, but also because that very fact that we have so much in common, we have much more in common than we are different. Our cultures are different, and that's significant, but the things that draw us together as human beings are much more profound and much greater. And bodhicitta and Holy Spirit is one example. Sorry, I'll be quiet
The
now.
Holy Spirit. Yes. Thanks. Thay. Thank you. Thank you. I won't forget you, because I think of you when in the Bible study, people want to stop me to talk about the Buddha and his teaching. And what is common? It's 90% the same thing.
Mm.
But what's behind it is love and helping other people.
Yeah, yes. Which means putting the self aside.
Yes.
There's a local Uniting Church minister from Semaphore, a little suburb in Adelaide called Semaphore, which is the church that my grandparents were married in. She has invited me to preach in her church on the Sunday before Christmas. And the topic is, why does a Buddhist monk love Jesus? And I was due to go and talk about this a couple of weeks ago when I had COVID, but I didn't get to go. And there was a man in the congregation who was horrified that this Buddhist should come along and talk about Jesus. What could he possibly know about Jesus like that? And then after the service, he went to the minister and told her that he thought that she should stop being the minister. Fancy bringing a Buddhist in here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens when this man turns up on the day that I preach and tells me that a Buddhist can't possibly love Jesus. I mean, if there's somebody that I can't love because of a category, then I'm not a very good practitioner.
Yeah.
If we remove all the categories and just love people with an open heart, then we're practitioners of the way that the Buddha taught. The Buddha wasn't terribly interested in whether someone was a Brahmin or what's the name? An untouchable. He didn't particularly care. He didn't even try to convince people to give up the religion they held.
Yes.
He just tried to explain truth within the context that they could understand. That's all he did. And that's a wonderful thing for us to remember, is that the Buddha had great respect for all people, and that's what we are supposed to be like. That's what we are called to be, humans in that way. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this man has to say to us. I hope I just remain very calm and Buddhistic.
That is the the practice, that we always want to have, to look beyond the form, isn't it? To love everyone. But it's not easy, Thay. I think you can do it.
Not always. No, not at all. I'm no different from you, Meredith. Believe me. I live on the inside of this person, and he's not. It doesn't just have a very easy time. But we have to just keep on trying. We fall down and we get up, and we fall down and we get up.
Yeah.
And one day maybe we'll get up and we won't fall down again. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, at least the awareness is there. Sometimes that you get annoyed by people, then you kind of remind yourself to look beyond the form. Like, this is the consciousness. I mean, like, as you say that, we are all the same. To bring out that compassion, no matter what the actions or the reaction of that form are doing. Yeah, but
and we never know.
Our
sorry.
That's our ultimate practice, isn't it?
Yes. And the other thing is that we never know what's happened to someone in their day. We might think, oh, what a nasty person, oh, this, oh, that. But we have to find out what's happened in their day to cause them the kind of suffering that they're expressing in their behavior towards us.
Exactly.
Understanding, compassion, karuna.
Yes.
And that's not easy either.
And when you say about renunciation, Thay, like, for your renunciation is like something like a letting go with understanding. But for parents, that type of renunciation, it's probably not with understanding. It's probably just letting go with fears and with worries, because they can't do much about it.
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I just remember, as I got older and my mother got older, and yesterday was my mother's 100th birthday. So I bought a cake at the bakery and I bought 100 and I sang happy birthday to my mum, even though she died a long time ago. But it reminded me of how much I really love my mother, and that I would do anything for my mother, and I would do anything for my father too. What I also remembered was that in spite of all the challenges that I presented to my mother and father, there was never a time when they didn't love me. There was never a time when I felt that they didn't love me. Of course, they might be irritated by me, and because I was very challenging as a young person, I did all sorts of crazy things as a young hippie that my parents were horrified at. I remember my aunt one day walking along the street in Adelaide, and there I was with all this hair and these terrible clothes. And my poor aunt, she nearly had a heart attack seeing her nephew walking along like this. But my mum saw me wearing clothes, and she wished I would, she wished I wasn't a hippie and all of that, but she still loved me all the same. And I think, that's extraordinary love. Even though she could never understand, or even though she might continue to want me to be different, she still loved me. And as she got older, much older, and had dementia and all of that, I would knock at her front door and she would open the door and see it was me, and I could see the love in her face. It was like a light went on in her face, and I knew that I was loved. I knew that she was pleased to see me. And when she had dementia, nobody could bath her or give her tablets except me. But she didn't know who I was. She just thought I was some strange man in yellow pajamas and a bald head. She didn't know who I was. But I could bath her, I could give her a medication, I could get her to do things most of the time. But she wouldn't let other people do it. She didn't know who I was, but she still knew somehow in there that this man was someone she could trust and she could let him do these things. And then she died in my arms. And I look back at that and I think, well, life could not have given me a more wonderful gift than that. What more can I ask of life than to be with my parents when they died and to conduct their funerals, to make sure that when they died with a good reputation. That circle of love was completed. You know? Well, I don't know why I'm saying all that, but there you are.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And not only that, but whether you expect it or not, that's how your children will feel about you. The way you feel about your mother is the way your children will feel about you. The reward will be there. I say that to people. You might think your mother's a difficult person or not, but you know, or you might think your children don't really love you or that, but you wait till you get old and sick, and your children will be the ones who hopefully will be there to support you and love you through.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I talk too much.
No.
Not at all. Okay. It's always very inspired, and always our hearts is filled with warmth and love, after listening to your talk. I'm sure everyone agrees with me. So
We do.
yeah, with that, this is the last talk of 2022, and there's nothing more appropriate than this topic day. So thank you so much for that. And we hope that you can take this time to have some rest yourself. We'll expect you to come back in March, isn't it? You're saying you will come back in March. So the association will be closed until 1st February. 1st February, Bhante Teja will be back to offer his teaching on the 1st February. Hopefully, if he's well enough. But we plan to have the 1st February teaching by Bhante Teja. So stay tuned. I will post it in the Facebook, in the website, to inform everyone of our teaching next year.
Shall we dedicate the merit?
Yes, we will dedicate the Merits Day.
May the wholesome energy that we have generated together tonight and at any other time in our lives be for the benefit of all living beings. May all living beings be well and happy. May all living beings be free from suffering. May all living beings know peace and joy and the causes of peace and joy. And may we continue together to walk the Buddha's path of truth and love. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu.